And for those of you just joining us, welcome to our Ask a Librarian Music Collections webinar. My name is Renee. I'm the Acting Learning Program in our Reader Services section at the National Library. And soon I'll be joined by my colleagues, Sue, Rachel and Scotia. We're all reference librarians at the National Library. I'd like to say at this point, thank you to everyone who submitted a question for this webinar. Unfortunately, we were only able to select 4 to answer in detail, but rest assured, if you did send a question to us, you will hear from us via our Ask a Librarian service or from me via email. The questions we selected were those that we felt gave us broad scope for demonstrating a range of approaches or techniques that would be applicable to a range of questions. And also they would take us to many areas in the collection where you can find music and music-related material. Okay, so that's all the introduction from me. I'll just stop the video so we can concentrate on the presentation. So let's do a session overview. After an introduction to the music collection, we'll briefly cover other areas in the library that hold music and music-related material in our special collections. We'll also touch on highlights of the music collection, and then we'll answer 2 of your questions, and then we'll pause for a Q&A break. Then we'll answer the final 2 questions and pause for a final break before wrapping up the session. And these are the questions we'll be covering today. So 1, how can I find out of copyright music to view at home? Question 2, Symphony Australia collection and copyright issues. 3, researching entries in the National Anthem quest in 1973. And finally, finding the words and music from Molly Riley. All right, so what's in the music collection? And that is to say, what formats do we collect? Well, we collect printed and digital music, scores, albums, serials, music manuscripts, multimedia kits, educational publications, and owner-bound volumes. Some items have been digitised, which means that you can view them online, and we'll see some examples of those soon. But what's not in the music collection? Well, the formats we don't collect are commercial recordings, so we don't have commercially recorded CDs or cassettes or vinyl records. There are a few exceptions. Some of those items are in multimedia kits that we collect. But in general, since 1984, these formats have been collected by the National Film and Sound Archive. So if you're interested in those, that's the place to go. All right, so let's now move to our music collection. Well, we have over 300,000 music scores and sheet music items, which makes us the largest sheet music collection in Australia. We have primarily Australian published and unpublished sheet music covering a range of genres, but we also have some overseas music, and they include overseas music published in Australia, which is useful for showing what Australians were playing or listening to at a particular time. And we also collect overseas music that provides context for researchers, or that's already included in larger formed collections that's been donated to the library. Where you can find music in other special collections, we'll turn to that now. So first, manuscripts. You can find music and music-related material in the manuscripts collection. So here's an example. Overall in the manuscripts collection, we have the archives or the unpublished personal papers and correspondence of performers, composers and music organisations. Our image here shows an example of unpublished manuscript material. It's a salary book for the J.C. Williamson Theatrical Agency. We also collect ephemera and photographs relating to musical performances and the music trade. And on the screen, we have an image of one of our performing arts ephemera scrapbooks of Bessie Campbell, the banjo queen, along with some other items that were inside her scrapbook, like programs and clippings. I've included a picture of Bessie on the right from our pictures collection, so you can see that our collections complement one another. And our oral history and folklore collection. This image was taken by John Meredith, and it comes from the John Meredith Oral History and Folklore Collection, which includes 500 recordings between the 1950s and 1990s. And it covers traditional Australian folk music, songs, bush dance music, stories and recounts. Some of these have been digitised and you can listen to them online, especially when you see this icon in the catalogue. Okay, so let's turn to just touch on some highlights of our larger, some of our larger music collection items. There's certainly more than we have time to discuss today, so I'll just touch on them. We have the State Theatre Collection, over 13,000 performance scores for the orchestral music used to accompany silent films in Australian film theatres. And the J.C. Williamson Collection. We mentioned J.C. Williamson in connection with unpublished manuscripts previously, but the music collection in this larger collection comprises scores, performance parts, play scripts and libretti. And we have the Jeff Harvey Music Collection. Jeff Harvey was the musical director for Channel 9 for many years. This is a collection of almost 6,000 unpublished music arrangements and was used for many Channel 9 television shows from the 60s to the 90s. And the Symphony Australia Collection is a vast collection of chamber, choral, operatic, orchestral and vocal works by Australian composers and arrangers from colonial music to the 1970s. But my colleague Sue will discuss the Symphony Australia Collection in more detail later in the webinar. So how do we get all of this material? Well, many of the published items in our collections come to us through legal deposit. So under the Copyright Act, the library is required to collect Australian publications, both hard copy through legal deposit and born digital items through e-deposit. This ensures that a comprehensive collection of published materials relating to Australia and its people is always preserved for future generations to use. And as a result of all of these collecting activities, we now have millions and millions of items for people to use in their research. We also purchase some items, for example, secondhand printed music, and we've been fortunate to receive donations of manuscripts or collections of music from composers, conductors and their descendants. Where do we keep it all? Well, what we can see here are some images of stacks, that is underground shelved areas under the library. This is where our music collections are kept safe and dry and organised. They are closed stacks, which means that only library staff go there to retrieve items, usually when they've been requested to be used in the Special Collections reading room. So whereas in many libraries you can go and browse the shelves to find what you're looking for, in the National Library our stacks are closed. So how do we find what we're looking for when we can't physically go and browse the shelves? Well, we use the library's online tools like the catalogue, and this applies just as much to us as reference librarians as it does to you as researchers. And soon we'll share some of these techniques that we use for doing those searches. All right, let's embark on question one. Our first question, how can I find out of copyright music that I can view at home? Well, we selected this question to help people who ask us how to find music that they can perform freely or use in group practice at residential facilities, schools or in charitable organisations. So there are two key elements to this question, out of copyright and view at home. Now, to view music at home, I immediately think digitised music and that you can view online. And we have digitised many older sheet music items. So how do we find, but they aren't always out of copyright. So how do we find the ones that are? All right, so the best place to start your search is in the catalogue search box here, and you can find it easily on the library's homepage. All right, so we're just going to click through to the library's homepage. And before we start our search, I'll just introduce you to some features of this page that you'll find useful. Okay, so if we go to the top of the page, the drop-down menu gives us a list of collections. I could click on manuscripts or music or oral history and folklore and find out more about those collections. But for now, I'm going to scroll down the page to another really important link, our Get a Library Card link. So you could click on that and you'd be directed to an online form. And then once you've filled it in, we'll send a card out to your Australian residential address. Once you receive your card, you could go to our e-resources portal. You could log in to our fantastic new portal and access some really great databases, including Baker's Biographical Dictionary of Popular Musicians since 1990, Oxford Music Online, and Oxford Reference. And if you have any questions about using our collections, we can go back to the right over here and you can click on the Ask a Librarian box and send us your question. All right, so let's start our search in the catalogue search box. It's best when you start a search, but if you don't have an exact search term, if you don't have exact title or author, for example, start broadly and then narrow down. So I'm going to do a search for the word songbook. All right, and now here I am in the catalogue and I can see that I have 980 search results, my goodness. When I scroll down the list though, I can see that some of them are actually books and not music at all. So how do I get it down to just music in my search results list? Well, I can go over to the narrow search menu on the right side of the page. Narrow search really means that I can just reduce the number of search results shown in my list by making choices about what I want to have shown there. And I make those choices by selecting the links running down the side of the page. So I'm going to select music, the music link, because I only want to see items that have been catalogued as music. And that reduces the results to 581. Okay, we're on our way. But I can already see, looking at these sort of preview records, that this isn't going to be quite the list I need. At a glance, yes, the format is music, but they're all published quite recently. If I look at the dates here and here and here, those dates mean that these works will be, they'll be in copyright. Okay, and another thing in our catalogue, if an item from our collection has been digitised, we would expect to see a thumbnail or a small image of the cover of the work just to the left of the title, and there isn't one here. So I can now see that this is just a list of catalogued items, but they're not items that we can view online. Okay, let's find digitised items. We'll head back to the narrow search menu. And I'm going to go down to this link here, NLA Digital Material. By clicking on this link, I'll be able to see items that are held in the library's collection that have been fully digitised, and I can view it at home. All right, let's bring it up. And now I'm seeing thumbnails, so that's very encouraging. At a glance though, let's look at the dates. These are all published really quite early, maybe too early for me. So let me see if I can choose to see results for items that were published or that were on a subject that's just a little bit later than that. Okay, let's go back to narrow search. I could select a number of ways to narrow this search. I could click on one of the decade links here, but I'm actually going to look at subject area just up a bit. I'm going to click on more to open up the list. And now I can see that there are many to choose from. Cataloguers have obviously classified music under many, many subject headings. I'm going to choose this one, popular music, 1931 to 1940. The grey 2 afterwards tells me that there are 2 items that have been classified with that subject, at least that have been digitised. Okay, so now my list suddenly gets much more specific. Let's look at the first one in the list, jovial songs. I'll scroll up again. Okay, so let's look at some clues in the catalogue record. I can see when it was published. I can see how many pages are in the work. So it looks like it will contain a good number of songs. I can see a little preview of some of the contents, especially Australian specific contents. I can see in the notes field that it's for voice and piano. And down here, I can see the subjects that it's associated with. I could click on any one of those subjects and see more items that have been classified as being related to that subject. But what I'm really interested in is the copyright status button. This is one of my favorite things in the catalogue. I use it all the time. I'm going to click on it. And hooray, it's out of copyright. That's great news. Now, the information in this pane is based on the library's copyright status tool, which uses information in the catalogue, for example, the life dates of the creators or contributors, to provide an estimate of the work's copyright status. It's just for general guidance. It's not legal advice, but it is a really helpful estimation tool. So this work is out of copyright, and that means you're free to make a copy or perform it in public. We would just ask that you acknowledge the library, and I'll include a link for how to do that in our useful links list. Okay, let's go up again to the thumbnail. Let's click on it and see what happens. Okay, so we're taken to our Trove viewer now. We can see its table of contents. I'm going to click the zoom in button to make that a bit bigger so we can see it. Oh, it's maybe too big. I can click the zoom out button to make it smaller again. But just there is a good overview of what's contained. I could scroll down and see every single page, readily viewable. On the left side of the page, I could use some of these links if I were doing research on this kind of music. I could use the cite tool. I could download a low resolution copy, or I could even order a high resolution copy through our Copies Direct service. But the fantastic thing about digitized materials is that they're readily available wherever you are. Okay, and that's the story of finding out of copyright material that you can view at home. So I'll now hand over to my colleague Sue for question 2.
Okay. Well, hello everyone. Thanks again for dropping by and watching this video with us. My name's Sue, and I'm looking at the question of how to find items in the catalogue again, as Renee has just done, but this is more specifically about copyright, how to order items that might be in copyright, and a little bit about our Symphony Australia collection. So we'll just turn off the video so we can concentrate on the question because it's quite a big one. The question came from a collector of scores, and he's been looking for this version of Stanford's Songs of the Fleet, and he couldn't find it anywhere until he stumbled upon a copy in our collection. Stumbling upon music scores could be one of the most common ways that musicians and others find their ways into the library's music collections, usually through general internet searches. They're searching for specific titles or composers quite often. And then they say that the library is the only place they found this item, and now they want to get a copy. The second part of the question is about copyright, because the collector knew that the composer died in 1924 and the lyricist in 1938. So why is it not marked as out of copyright? And if it is out of copyright, how can you get a copy? So if we go to the catalogue record that he's found, there we go. We can see that it is marked as in copyright, but he has looked very carefully at the catalogue record and seen the date, so he feels that it should be out of copyright. And just in general, music can be more complex than books regarding copyright because there are often at least 2 creators, usually including a lyricist as well as the composer, so you have to look at both dates. The copyright status tool shows in copyright. This is the tool that Renee just mentioned, because this item is actually a manuscript. and because it comes from the Eugene Goosens collection, which is within the Symphony Australia collection. It does seem a bit complicated, but you can see the notes here confirms that it's Symphony Australia. The Symphony Australia collection comes from the ABC orchestras. Symphony Australia began with the full-time ABC orchestras, and they were used for concerts and radio broadcasts, and was set up later. This was early in the century, in the 30s, I believe, and later was set up as an independent company as part of the ABC. The Symphony Australia Library donated its collection of music scores to the National Library in 2001, and further instalments later as well. So the Eugene Goosens collection of music scores is part of the Symphony Australian collection. Goosens was the conductor of the Sydney Symphony Orchestra, which was one of the full-time symphony orchestras in each of the capital cities established by the ABC after the war. So the library is very lucky to get that full collection from them. Goosens conductors' scores may be heavily annotated by Goosens, and in some cases are inscribed by the composer. As such, they are catalogued as manuscripts, unpublished, so therefore they're still regarded as in copyright. And sometimes we are able to send you, if you ask through Ask a Librarian, we might be able to send you a photograph of the first page, just so you can see what the condition of the item and what you're going to get if you request a copy of it. So you can see in this case, this is the first page of the Songs of the Fleet, the first song, Sailing at Dawn. And this is what the item actually looks like, obviously used quite heavily by Eugene Goosens. Just because the item is a manuscript and in copyright, it doesn't mean that a copy is not available. In many cases, the library is authorised to provide copies of donated materials. Orders will be checked for copyright or preservation issues on receipt. So I'm just going to click through here to the catalogue record and show you how to order a copy. Yes, oh, it's huge. Right, down to the bottom of the page, this is the Songs of the Fleet. This is the one we want. All the information is here about the actual item. The first thing you need to do is click on Order a Copy and Add to Cart. Now, you don't have to be a library subscribed registered reader to do this, because a payment will be involved. But you can order a copy through this. And as I say, all the Copies Direct staff will check it for copyright and let you know the outcome if necessary. So in the Copies Direct form, you've got already everything's populated up here, but you will have to choose whole item or parts of item. Especially in music, this is important because sometimes the part might be just the string part or the brass parts, you know, depending on what's in the music, or you might want the whole item. So in this case, we're going to look for the whole item, and you need to put in first the estimated number of pages, and it will tell you up here in the description. So it's a manuscript score and has 93 pages. So then in this case, you'll put 93 pages up here in this box. Other information, probably not necessary in this case. And as always in Copies Direct form, I say follow the blue buttons. So this one is Add to Cart, and this now reminds you of everything that you've requested. So you've requested Songs of the Fleet, 5 songs, and it's 93 pages, and then you can proceed to order details. This page will estimate the cost for you. So you're going to order a document scan or a PDF document, which will be sent to you via a download. So what the Copies Direct staff will send you a URL, a web page where you can go and download the item to your own computer. And it's estimated, given you the cost here. In this case, it's going to be $76 because it's $19 per 25 pages. So we've given the number of pages, and that's the estimate, the cost. On the next page, there will be a declaration of use. This is essential for all Copies Direct orders. In this case, as I understand it, there was a collector of music who wanted to collect this item just for his own record, so he can click research, study or personal use, and then he can put in just it's for personal study or for his collection. Now, if you want it for public use, especially for performance, you're going to have to put your declaration there. If the item is in copyright, you will need to send your permission to publish first to the Copies Direct staff. The contact email for Copies Direct staff is here. So if you email the copyright holder, they send you your permission to get it published, permission to copy, sorry, and permission to perform. Then you can click on this contact up here, and you can see the email that you can forward your permission to. And then Copies Direct staff will keep that on file. When they receive your order, they'll go into that, and you can mention here that you've sent them the permission to publish for public use. And that's a permission to perform, sorry, and because that's what most musicians want. And then you agree to all the terms and conditions, and then proceed to review order. So, well, I haven't done anything, so I get the red sign. You have to fill in all those starred places before you can proceed. And the pages after that are just your credit card details. Your credit card won't be charged until the order is filled, and if Copies Direct staff need to contact you about the order, they will before they do anything. So that's how you order a copy. And if I just go back to our homepage while I'm in the live site here, I'll show you another method that might come up in getting a copy of items. In this case, I'm going to look for String Quartet, if I can spell it, 6 by Alfred Hill. Alfred Hill is another Symphony Australia personality, I was going to say, but there he is. So we've got 2 items, String Quartet number 6. It comes up right at the top because I knew what I was searching for. So you see this, the second one I'm clicking on is this Alfred Hill collection of music scores and parts, and it's part of the Symphony Australia collection. And this one again, oh, sorry, I clicked on, if I click on copyright status, it's in copyright because it's a manuscript. And even though, as you can see here, it's a manuscript score. But if we go back to the search results and click the first result here, we can see that this item has actually been published by Stars Music Publications 2007. And if you scroll down even further, you can see that we've got 2 copies in the library. So one of these will be available for interlibrary loan. So all you need to do then is go to your local library and ask them to help you with filling out all the forms that they need for interlibrary loan. Again, there is a cost involved depending on what your local library, their procedures. So you can request an interlibrary loan, but then if you are requesting something for performance, it's then up to it's your responsibility then to obtain any permission necessary for performance. So you can get the copy of the music, but then you will have to adhere to any copyright regulations before you actually use it, publish it or perform it. So if I go back to the PowerPoint while we're talking about copyright, the way to find permissions for a performance for Australian and New Zealand music is to go to APRA AMCOS. So APRA AMCOS is the website for all Australian and New Zealand music, and they can help to find copyright owners. There's a link here where in Contact Us in their website. And I won't click through to the website today, but you can find that in that link. There's another section, another link to, if you particularly want copyright permissions, they can help you find the owner. Also, the Australian Copyright Council helps with general questions about your legal responsibilities regarding copyright, including duration of copyright, tips on finding copyright owners, and you can check for copyright rules, because it's legal and it can be complex. So that's a good way to find some answers. In fact, you click on find an answer for all those help tips on the Australian Copyright Council. So if we just quickly, to finish off, go back to Symphony Australia. Another part of Symphony Australia is the Australian collection of concert touring schedules. This is the artist itineraries and so on for those ABC concerts that were broadcast on radio, and well, it tells you here, historic set of typescripts of ABC artist touring schedules from 1933 to 1937. The itineraries include dates and places for individual tours and names of performers, with annotated notes indicating cancelled or changed arrangements, and memos. You can see whether they went by boat or train, or which city they flew to, and all the dates associated with particular artists. Some Australian artists, a lot of overseas artists came in for the concerts as well. The schedules have been digitised, and you just click on the dates you're looking for. Under here you see, oops, went too far. Oh dear, because I can't see records in this collection. That will be finding the tours. There they are there, as you've already had a preview. So just quickly, I was looking for this particular schedule here because there was a musicologist looking for information about the final solo recitals of William Capel just before a plane crash. The schedule shows the final concert in October 22nd in Geelong in 1953. Unfortunately, the library doesn't hold a program for the concert, but the University of Melbourne has a collection which may include it. So we could forward that information to him. But here we can at least see the date and where the concert was held. And we can also use Trove, as you probably know all about Trove newspapers. But here we found the concert that was actually broadcast on October the 22nd live from the Plaza Theatre in Geelong, and William Capel played Sonata Opus, Chopin Sonata Opus 35. So that gave us a little bit more information about that after checking the schedules from ABC. So that's about all I have on Symphony Australia.
Thanks so much, Sue. That's terrific. There have been some questions coming in while we've been speaking. One of them touches on the issue of this estimation tool for copyright. So I'm just going to show an image. I'm just going to go back to one of our catalogue records. They're in all of the catalogue records. Anything that has a copyright status button attached to it. We just click on this. Okay, we can see our in copyright status there. Let's go down now to this link, how copyright status is determined, to see a flow chart. This is a very rough, it's an approximate rule of thumb. It's not legal advice, but it shows you at a glance how the catalogue is arriving at that status. So you can see that in any catalogue record, and that's just to help you. But in general, we would direct people to the Australian Copyright Council. I'm just going to do a search for their website now. Here it is. Right. Australian Copyright Council. And to find music-specific information, I would go to find an answer, search for an answer, and in this box, I would just type in music. And that will bring up many more information sheets that have a bit more detailed information about music and copyright, because it is a really complex question. And so we're not, it's really up to the researcher to find that for themselves.
Can I just go back to the copyright tool?
Yes.
Which I don't know where it is now.
It's just over here. This one.
Oh, lost it.
Okay.
This one.
That's it.
When it tells you at the bottom here, the copyright status may not be correct if the record is incomplete. So what the status tool is taking its information from the dates that it sees in the catalogue. So it can only take the copyright date from the date that's available. If the date is not available, if there's a question mark after the date, it will be made as in copyright.
Yes.
Or copyright undetermined. So you do have to go through, maybe find a little bit more information.
And that's why your example was so helpful, just to tease out some of those complexities.
Yeah.
Okay, well, look, thank you so much, Sue. Okay, I think that's all the questions we have at the moment. So we'll just hand over to our next presenter, our colleague, Rachel.
Hello everyone, my name is Rachel and I'm going to just talk us through the third question that we had, which is how do I find musical entries to the Australian National Anthem Quest, held by the Australian Council for the Arts in 1973. And the second part of the question is, why did the judges, John Hopkins, Peter Sculthorpe, Don Burrows and Maria Pereira, decide that none of the entries were good enough to be the country's anthem? This question is a really good example of the type of broader research questions that we often get asked that do relate to the music collection, but also can involve researching other collection areas in the library. So I think we'll just turn off the video now so that we can work through this question. Thanks. Okay. So to give a little bit of background to start with, in 1973, the Australian Council for the Arts held the Australian National Anthem Quest competition to find both the lyrics and the music for a new national anthem. The competition was actually held in two parts. They received more than 2.5 entries for the lyrics, which was the first part, followed by 1,300 entries for music, and none of those were actually chosen. So as I've kind of mentioned, the question is really a two-part question. The first part is looking for musical entries to the competition, while the second part wants to find out why none of them were chosen as the anthem. So a good place to start with actually finding any of the musical entries held here at the library is to go to the catalogue. So if we go back to our homepage, a simple place to start is just to actually put the search into the search box here. And for this, I'm just going to use the keywords National Anthem Quest and just go and search. Okay. So we can see from there that there are actually 6 results. So that's not too many to actually have to work through. We can at a glance get some sort of idea of what's actually available. Now the first entry here, the Australian National Anthem Quest, which is music, obviously looks promising. But before I'm going to actually follow through that trail, I'm going to have a bit of a closer look first at the other search results, because it may actually be quite easy just to eliminate those to start with. So a couple that catch my eye is there's one here that says lyrics 1973 and another one that says lyrics 1973, which are manuscripts material. And if we click on them and open up the catalogue record, we can find out a little bit more information. So opening up that first one, it actually in the summary tells us that these were words for the tune of Land and Hope and Glory and was submitted for the National Anthem Quest. So people were allowed to submit lyrics to existing tunes in that lyrics competition part of the quest. So if we go back, obviously looking at that, we can see it's not a musical entry. And chances are, when we go on to this one, down the bottom, by Ruth Clark, we will see that these are Australian words for the tune of God Save the Queen. And again, as it mentions Australian National Anthem Quest, I think we can be fairly safe in assuming that they were for the lyrics competition. So if we go back to our 6 results and have another look at some of the others, these 2 entries here, they're both music, well, that's manuscripts, but it's musical scores. This is music with the same composer, Bradley Riley. So we'll just go in to have a look at this one, which is God Bless This Land. And this actually tells us it's a manuscript score, and it was an entry in the Australian National Anthem Quest 1973. It's for voice and piano. So it's obviously, it's music and words and music by Bradley Riley. So we've actually here found one of the entries for the musical competition. If we go back to the entry for the musical scores by the same composer, we can see in the summary that it includes an entry in the Australian National Anthem Quest titled God Bless This Land, which confirms what we were looking at before. So that's really just saying that we hold 2 copies of this particular entry to the competition. So just heading back once more, oh, not that far. We'll just go into there and open up my 6 results again. The last entry down on here, if you want to just have a quick look, is the papers of Donald Wakeling. So they're manuscripts material. So we're just going to have a quick click in there. And we can see in the summary again that these papers do relate to national anthems and a quest for the Australian National Anthem, but they cover the years 1941 to 1960, including an article that he wrote in a periodical. There's no mention of any musical works as such. So I think from this you can probably assume this is not really relevant for the 1973 competition. So going back just to the first entry that we found, the Australian National Anthem Quest. And if we click open on that one, we can see that it's actually a commemorative album and it's for voice and piano. So an album of sheet music, if you like, and with the title that it's got, and it's a commemorative album, it's obviously an album for the quest itself. Unfortunately, it doesn't give us the contents. So we haven't got a record list of individual songs in the album. So we could, of course, request the item from the stack area and view it in our special collections reading room if we wanted to see the full contents. And obviously, if you're interested in actually reading the music itself, you would have to do this. It's not digitized, it's not available online. But there is another option that we can try if we're just trying to maybe find a list of contents. The other option is to search Trove. As Sue and others have mentioned, you're probably all familiar with Trove, but it does include records for items held in libraries and institutions across Australia. And these records can include different amounts of information. So it's possible that we may find some extra information if we go into Trove. So just going to the Trove homepage, I am going to choose the music, sound and video subset, because at the moment I'm only interested in searching the music items, and that one that we're looking for, the commemorative album, was a music item. So I'm just going to put in the search in here. I'm going to put it in quotes because Trove is such a much larger database, if you like. I'm trying to not bring up too many superfluous results, and so I can narrow it down by actually just searching on the phrase itself. So having done that, we can see that there's actually 5 entries, 5 results. The top 2 relate to this commemorative album by George S. English. God Bless His Land is also there. But if we click on the first one, the Australian National Anthem Quest, and there's more than one edition too, but if I click on the first edition and scroll down, I can actually see that there is a list of contents, which includes entries to the competition, as well as 3 already established songs. So without actually viewing the item, we get able to see a list of contents and find the titles and composers of some of the entries to the competition. So from our search of the library's catalogue, it's apparent that the library doesn't hold all 1,300 musical entries, no surprise there. But as can often be the case, it's not always possible to find everything that you're looking for. However, we have established that the library has a number of musical entries, namely those in the commemorative album and the song God Bless This Land. So I'm just going to move on now to the second part of this question, which was why did the 4 judges decide not to choose any of the musical entries? So assuming that the competition would have received press attention at the time, we can try to find newspaper articles which might shed light on the judge's decision. Trove includes a subset of digitised Australian newspapers. Most of you are probably familiar with that. Coverage is mainly up to and including 1954. due to copyright limitations. However, the library was given permission to digitise some titles for later years, including the Canberra Times. So back in Trove, I'm going to just click on where it says digitise newspapers and more, just so we can have the search up there. So we're still searching under this National Anthem crest phrase. We've got 28 results, but if I want to, I can actually narrow these down further by using the limiters on the left-hand side of the page here. So to start with, I might just drop down to where it says decade, and I'm going to choose 1970 to 79. And then within that, I can actually narrow it down further to 1973, which was the year in which the crest was held. I'm also going to remove the advertising because that's not going to tell me a great deal. I'm just looking for the articles. Now I've actually left myself with the advertising. Don't want to do that. Okay, let's go back. We want the articles. All right, so now I've just got a result of 5, which is much more manageable. And having a quick glance down there, I can see that the second result, which says familiar tune to be new anthem, looks like a promising result. So if I click on that link and open it up, I can actually read the article itself and just paraphrase, or just basically going through what it says there. It quotes the chairman of the Quest subcommittee as saying, in the opinion of the judges, none of the anthems submitted reached the high standard already set by such familiar songs as Waltz in Matilda, Advance Australia Fair and Song of Australia. Since the Australian government has made it clear from the outset that these songs would be considered, the judges have recommended that the choice of the anthem should be between these 3 familiar and established songs. So that may be a sufficient answer to our second part of our question, namely why the judges did not choose any of the musical entries. However, if we wanted to, we could try to find out a bit more. And one way we could do this would be to investigate if the library holds the personal papers of any of the 4 judges. Our manuscript collections include a wide variety of unpublished material, including letters, musical scores, photographs, and so on. I know we've touched on it already slightly. So I'm going to just go back, and I'm actually going to go into the catalogue here by clicking on the link. And I'm going to search for one of the judges and just see what we have. And I'm going to choose these add limits. I'm going to choose from here manuscript because I'm just after personal papers. They're going to be in the manuscript collections. I'm going to go find, and we get one. It's the papers of Kurt and Maria Perra, and if we open that up, we can also see when we scroll down that luckily for this there is a summary, but there's also a online finding aid, which is really handy for large collections such as this. And you can access those by clicking on the link. And it gives you a really good detailed view. It opens it up in the Trove viewer, and you're able to scroll through and actually get much more of an idea of what's actually held in this collection. And we can see there scrolling through, if we go down to series 9, it includes her papers on Australian art bodies 1971 to 96. And we are looking for something relating to the Australian Council for the Arts for 1973. And if we go down a little bit further within Series 9, we can see that it includes correspondence and cuttings relating to the Australian Council for the Arts 1973. And up here, it says it includes correspondence regarding the Australian National Anthem Quest. So we can see that's going to be useful, but as is often the case with research, the more you dig, the more you can end up with questions rather than answers. I actually requested this item look at in the Special Collections Reading Room and found a folder that includes several relevant press clippings, which all provided the same information as that found in the Canberra Times article, but which also lists the 4 judges involved. And interestingly, they all named Ernest Llewellyn rather than John Hopkins as a judge. However, also within the same folder in the same papers, there was a Commonwealth Government printed pamphlet which includes the top 6 lyric entries chosen by the word judges. And in the foreword written by Manning Clark, he lists the 4 judges for the forthcoming music competition and included John Hopkins rather than Ernest Llewellyn. So, as I say, it's created the question of, was it John Hopkins or Ernest Llewellyn who was the fourth music judge for the competition? Unfortunately, at this time, we're not going to go any further down that rabbit hole, otherwise we could be here for a hell of a lot longer. But it is something, when you're doing research, you have to know when to stop. But another time, if you wanted to, you could continue research in the library and the papers. We do hold the papers for both Ernest Llewellyn and John Hopkins, and indeed for the other judges involved in the competition. But for now, though, we know that the library holds some of the musical entries to the 1973 Australian National Anthem crest, but none of the entries were chosen because they were judged to not reach the standard of familiar existing songs already under consideration.
Thank you so much, Rachel. We'll now hand over to Scotia for our final question today.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm Scotia, our reference librarian here, and I will take you through the fourth question today. It's going to be short and sweet, so we shouldn't be too far over the 2 o'clock deadline. Now I'll just turn off the video. Okay. So I'd like to find the words and music of Molly Riley. I read in the book Battling for Gold by John Marshall that he witnessed this song being sung at a political rally in Kalgoorlie in 1902. I've tried to find the words to Molly Riley but have not been successful. I'd very much like to obtain a copy. Okay, I started by searching our catalogue for Molly Riley as the first port of call, but didn't really see anything like specific sheet music. So I also repeated this search in Trove. I was able to find several notices in the newspaper zone about the song appearing in the Christmas annual songbooks for both the Nicholsons and Palings. So I went back to our library catalogue to search for Palings Christmas Annual. You see I've just highlighted in the middle useful information about Palings & Co.'s Christmas Annual number 13, which comes back to be a useful snippet. So here's the catalogue record for the Christmas Annual, and on this next slide, you can see that it was marked as being digitised. This means I can click this blue text here and see the digital copies. We have digitised several editions of both of these journals, but unfortunately the year I was after had not been digitised. But thanks to Trove telling me that I was after number 13 of Palings Christmas Annual, I rechecked our catalogue holdings. So there's back to the catalogue, and down the bottom, perfectly, number 13, 1896. I've requested this material up, and after it being delivered to our Special Collections reading room, this is what it looks like. So from this catalogue record, the inquirer can now select order a copy and have it sent to them via mail or email through our Copies Direct service. And on these, all of these music magazines, we had a listing of all of the songs. Molly Riley's up there, but she's down the back on page 26. Now, also in our catalogue, a search for Molly Riley brought up an oral history recording. This is part of the Rob Willis Folklore Collection, and Maisie Tucker was recorded 15 times as part of this collection. Luckily, they have listed the songs talked about or sung within the recording, and Molly Riley was returned in this catalogue record. So this recording has been digitised, and this Listen Online logo shows us that we can click on through and listen to the material. So I'm just going to say yes to the terms and conditions. And this one was it doesn't have the time summary like a lot of them do. I serendipitously managed to click on 9 minutes 20 on playlist 4 and pretty much clicked right on it by accident. So we're just going to listen to a small part of Molly Riley.
Oh, Molly Riley, I love you. Tell me, Molly Riley, does your heart beat true? I'll marry you, me darling, I'll die if you say no. And me ghost will come and haunt you, Molly Riley, oh.
That's for that. Okay, so even though we don't have the lyrics to that song, oh, we do have the tunes. Now, we'd also seen that what was in the oral history recording was different to the printed music. Molly Riley is obviously a popular title, so we've got that variation there. For our, we'll send all of these links and this information to the Inquirer, and they can make a decision about which version was actually sung in Kalgoorlie in 1902.
That's great. Thanks so much, Scotia. Well, and now, do we have any questions? It looks like it's all quiet on the question front at the moment. So I'll just close. We're very close to time. I'd just like to say thank you again so much to everyone who sent in their questions and just for listening so carefully today. As I mentioned before, we are recording today's session, and we've also recorded many sessions in the past. If you have an interest in one of our past topics, we have many more than are appearing here, but these are ready to watch right now on our YouTube channel. And if you have any further questions that you think of after today's session, please use our Ask a Librarian service. Thank you again so much for attending today. Thank you to Sue, Rachel, Scotia for their great work. Well, that's all for now. This is our final webinar for 2019, but don't worry, we're all hard at work on new webinars for 2020. So until next year, happy researching.